Okay, fantastic. I think we've got most people who are going to join, so we'll make a start. So thank you for dialing in this morning, and welcome to this Wales Tech Week webinar. Before I go any further, just let me play the intro video as part of the Wales Tech Week. So I'll just get that going now. Fantastic. So a massive welcome to everyone and thank you for joining this session as part of the Wales Tech Week this morning. So please note this session has been recorded, and we're going to make the kind of recording as well as the slide deck available to you after today's session. So if you miss anything or just want to recap, then don't worry at all, it will come your way. Also, towards the end of the webinar, we're going to give time for questions, so please feel free to put those in the chat at any point throughout this webinar, and then obviously at the end we'll try and answer them the best that we possibly can. Okay, I've also got a few of my team on the call as well, so I can field some questions. I'm sure they'll field others as well. All right, so the plan for this morning's webinar. I want to just start by saying, what the heck has just happened? We've obviously been through a massive pandemic, and we're by no means at the end of that. But what does that mean from a digital marketing perspective? So I want to look at the changes in the data that we've seen, and the huge changes to what would be considered as norm, really. So we want to share that with you. I want to then dive into different channels and different targeting methods. So I'm going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the main pay-per-click channels and look at the pros and cons of each one. We're then going to look at some quick wins and tips. So we're going to leave you with something to actually take away and something you can implement in your PPC campaign today if you're running one already. And then obviously at the end, we'll make some time for questions. So please don't be shy. Feel free to send those questions in at any point, and we'll do our best to answer them. I'm going to try and do all this in roughly half an hour or so, fingers crossed. So as we commence, if you want to pull up the participant list and chat box, just so you've got those available to you. And if you are currently using, paid ads, then maybe you just might want to make a little note in the chat or use the raise hand option just to kind of signify that you're currently using paid ads, just so I get a feel of who's using it already and who isn't. So if you want to do that, that'd be fantastic. I can see some hands going up already. So feel free to do that in the raise hands or comments area, whichever works for you. Fantastic. Got plenty of hands going up. Great. Okay, so it's a bit of a mixed bag, which is good because if you're using it already, hopefully there's some value here to further refine your campaign. And if you're not using it already, then hopefully I'm going to make it clear why paid ads is a really good route to market and a really good way to grow your brand. So let's get into it. What on earth just happened? Okay, so looking at some interest data from Google, and this data has just been pulled, so it's all live. You can see that the topic of lockdown, so people searching that kind of phrase and topics around it, obviously came into play, I guess, towards the end of February, where there was some interest spiking as the government was starting to announce it. And obviously then in March, it was all over the internet. So lots of people searching it. And the reason for putting this graph up is I want to use it as a benchmark against some other things. So I'm going to overlay some data to kind of make the point. So if I were to add into the mix searches around the topic of wine, okay, so you can see that when lockdown came, there were some clear peaks in March all the way through to June, and still searches are higher than what we would consider normal to be. Now, this isn't a great surprise because we're all at home, and most of us have turned to e-commerce stores rather than traditional shops. So it kind of makes sense. But it also is really useful data for those who might actually be, selling wine online or wine subscriptions. This is the kind of data that you would use to then inform how your campaigns move forward. If I overlay another data set on top of this, so here we've got searches around laptops, you can see that there was a big jump around the second week of March. So this shows how many people just weren't geared up for working from home, nor even portable working. So they probably worked in their office from a desktop computer and not necessarily a laptop, which they could just take from the office and start working from home. Interestingly, we saw a similar pattern with things like home office equipment and office chairs. And I know at WebBox, we had a new starter in March, and we bought her a laptop for her to use. But we simply couldn't find a laptop for love nor money. So it kind of makes sense. There was a huge spike in demand. And obviously, we were also having troubles trying to import those parts and products into the UK. So maybe it doesn't come as a surprise, but really helpful to inform your campaigns. And the fourth and final one, just as a bit of a more light-hearted one, is the topic of quizzes. So this is the green line. So I'm sure we've all been party to an online quiz over the past few months, and I'm sure that we've all had some questions come up time and time again, as the person who's searching for questions will probably click on the first few links on a search engine. Interestingly, each peak is a weekend, so it shows a clear pattern and also a consistent pattern to when these quizzes are happening. So again, if this was obviously it's a kind of trivial example, but if this was your market, then you would know to adapt your campaign to be more prominent on the weekend than within the week. Just diving into then some mobility data provided from Google again. So this is data based on people's whereabouts gathered from their mobile devices between May and July. And it's compared to what Google refers to as the baseline. And what I'll do is when I send out the slide deck and notes is you'll have a link to look into this data in a little bit more detail. But what you can see from this data is we were obviously not going out to our usual places. So Google know obviously where there are retail or supermarket or kind of park locations, and it knows obviously when we go near those. So it kind of gives you some idea as to the extent in which we stayed away from them. So for example, you can see that we stayed away from retail locations by kind of less than 40% than a normal baseline. So this is kind of, again, really interesting data, because ultimately what it means is there's a huge shift in how people go and buy. It doesn't mean we necessarily bought less. It means we bought in a different way. And obviously that shift was moving to online sales. If we have a look at these three as a data set then, so you can see that we shied away from public transport quite a bit. Obviously, there's still a group of people who rely on it and would still use this, of course. We didn't go to our workplaces, nearly 50% less than normal. So again, that's a huge difference, a huge shift in how people have worked. And interestingly, we've spoken to some clients who actually are going to change their business model altogether and are probably going to let go of their office when the lease comes to an end and do remote working 100% of the time. So it's quite interesting how this pandemic is shifting not only the data we're seeing, but people's working habits as well. And obviously, probably goes without saying, we were at our homes far more than we would have been normally. And the final graph in this section just shows the shift from mobile first to desktop first as users started to work from home. So for example, people weren't browsing online using their mobile phone whilst commuting to work. So the first yellow line on the yellow box on this graph shows the period of Christmas where this particular retailer would see a normal spike. And then you can see this other spike clearly around kind of March and April time, where obviously the kind of coronavirus was most prevalent. So these are two periods of the year where people are more likely to be at home, because at Christmas you're more likely to be at home necessarily, rather than in work. And obviously through the pandemic, most people were working from home. Now this shift from mobile first to desktop first was like taking us back 5 years in terms of the data that we'd normally expect to see. Normally we would expect to see everything being mobile first. There's always, in most sectors, a leaning towards mobile first. And literally like overnight, it just changed. And it was almost like being back 5 years ago. Now this is really important data to inform how you then run a pay-per-click campaign. So why does all of this data matter? So at WebBox, we often say data is king. So don't make decisions on a hunch or what you think might be happening or what internal stakeholders might think is the best route, but make them based on evidence and based on data. That is how you'll get the most out of your campaign. And also data should inform your campaign tactics and strategy, including but not limited to which channels you use, which demographics you target, which devices you lean towards, and when you target people. So using that example of us not commuting to work in rush hour, that would change the time of day that you might try and target your demographic. So moving on then, I just want to go into channels and targeting methods, and I just want to start that with some quick tips. So we're going to start with 4 tips, so sharpen your pencils, and that's the only cheese that I'm going to put into this webinar, I promise. So tip number 1, get moving. If you're not doing pay-per-click campaigns at the moment as part of your overall marketing strategy, start now. For probably 75% of people across the UK, we've got access to internet and mobile devices. And this myth that people don't click on paid ads is just not true. It's not what the data says. Actually, when it comes to buying something and you have real intent, people will choose a paid ad 2 times out of 3. Okay, so paid ads are getting far more attention than they ever have. Also, it's where our attention is. Okay, so our attention in the morning is probably here. Our attention in any break is probably here. And in the evening, it's probably here. If we can target people where they are at, that is going to be really valuable to any campaign that we run. And we also know that traditional methods are obviously starting to become obsolete. So these are the methods which are successful for all brands, organizations and businesses now and moving forward. And also just a final thing is some channels are still really underpriced. So you look at an average cost per click in a Google campaign compared to a Facebook campaign, and you will get a lot more bang for your buck in Facebook. So actually use these channels whilst actually they might still be underpriced. Second tip is get personas. Know your audience, okay? Understand your customers, their interests, their hobbies, their job titles, their working patterns. If you know them through and through, then it's going to be far more easy for you to get in front of them because you're going to know their habits. Also, I just want to make a point that you need to know the purpose of the campaign. So often there's this kind of myth where people say, pay-per-click has to drive sales, it has to drive sales. And in some instances that's right, but there's also a place for brand awareness and things like impression share, market share. And actually these shouldn't go underestimated. So just keep in mind what the purpose of the campaign is, and then you can work to relevant KPIs, because your KPIs might not always be around sales or inquiries. Okay, third quick tip: build relationships. So we often talk about B2C, business to consumer, or B2B, business to business. But actually, I want to challenge that today, and I want to say actually it's P2P, it's people to people. People buy from people. It's really important that we understand that. And whatever you're doing, whether it's selling a product into a business, or whether you want someone to come onto an education course, or you're selling carpets, whatever it is, people buy from people. So we need to think like that. And part of that comes through brand awareness, and part of it comes through direct sales ads. Also, this could come through things like thought leadership. So actually being known as the leader within your sector will make you stand out over others. Now, I appreciate this isn't popular with FDs and financial managers, but it's a really important part of the buyer's journey. Also, I want you to just kind of put or kind of consider for yourself what your conversion funnel is. So we always talk about this thing, strangers, prospects, leads, customers, and that's a kind of funnel that we tend to use. But for you, it might be slightly different. So we'll go into that in a bit more detail shortly. But people don't go from strangers to customers overnight, and there is a journey which you need to take. And then a fourth quick tip is get granular. So there's no one size fits all here. Play around with different ad copy, messaging, audience targeting, and then try and segment your audiences and try different messaging. There's a lot of things in there, but if I give you like a basic example just to prove or to make the point, if your target demographic is males between 20 and 55, the same message might not appeal to all of them. So you might want to have different messaging for those between 20 and 30, those between 31 and 45, and those between 46 and 55. And having different messaging for each age group might actually improve the chances of the campaign working. Deep diving then into this kind of get granular theme. So you can actually use tools like the page transparency tool on Facebook. This actually gives you an idea of what your competitors and other people might actually be running on Facebook. So it's a really important tool to use. So you can go into the kind of ad library, you can see the content and the ads that they're using. And you can see how long they've been using them for. This is the really important bit. So if they've been using an ad for 6 months or 9 months, 12 months, it's quite likely that advert is working for them. So you can look at that advert and say, well, what is it about that is working? Is it maybe an offer? Is it the wording? Is it a particular call to action? And it's not to necessarily copy it, but it's to learn from it, to say, what are they doing? And then how could that apply to our campaign? You can also use tools such as SimilarWeb, and this allows you to benchmark against your competitors to find out the volume of traffic they receive, or things like what social media sites they're getting their traffic from, if any. And this kind of data, again, just allows you to benchmark yourself. The only note I'd say is the tool works best for kind of larger sites. So if you're like a small local business and you're comparing yourself again to another small local business, the data might not be particularly accurate. But where volumes start to increase, that we found the data seems to get a little bit more accurate. But it's worth giving it a go anyway. And then final part of this section is make better decisions by having the data at your fingertips, okay? So business to business funnel and buyer journeys are more complex than ever. And Google Analytics might only get you so far. So if you think about it, you might have upsells and cross-sells and different touch points, and you might have content downloads and different engagements. And all of these things are part of the buying cycle. So what you need to do is find a solution that is a central place where you can tie in all of this data, and then that allows you to make better and more informed decisions. So for example, some of the touch points might not show any conversions. So, it might be that, people who are downloading a white paper from your website aren't then becoming customers. But actually that might just be because you haven't got full sight, of the full picture. And actually, they are getting through to be a customer of yours, but there's a stepping stone approach, and downloading the white paper might be stepping stone 1 or 2. And there's other touch points in the middle, such as maybe seeing social media ads or finding you through another kind of channel before they become a customer. And having sight of all of that data is going to be really helpful. So we'd advise having a look at the kind of tool Data Studio, so Google Data Studio, before trying any paid options, just to see if that works for you. So let's move on then to channels and targeting methods. So if you just kind of have a look at this funnel in front of you, this is the kind of AIDA model. And throughout the kind of rest of the session, I'm going to look at different channels and targeting methods and relate them back to this funnel and where they're best to be used. So in the world of PPC advertising, there are many different targeting options available, and each are designed to create a unique way for advertisers to reach their target audience. So through PPC ad platforms like Google Ads, Microsoft Ads, and Facebook Ads, and many others, we're able to serve targeted messages to users based on their search behavior, content they've viewed, behaviors they've exhibited, and more. So yeah, in this section, I want to go through targeting options for search, display, and remarketing campaigns, and I'll explain each of those as we go through it, and how they can be used to engage with our potential customers. So let's get into it. So we're going to start with the traditional, the kind of big daddy Google search. Okay, so Google search is obviously one of the predominant pay-per-click channels. It can aid at pretty much every stage of the AIDA funnel. However, it's a little weaker at the awareness stage, and it's stronger at the interest phase, and it really peaks in effectiveness at the decision and action stages. If you imagine you've got a product which no one is aware of, if you need to make someone aware of it, they're probably not going to search for it. So that's why Google search is a little bit weaker in that area. So when deciding whether or not to do paid search and considering your competition, don't think, oh, the cost per clicks in my industry look really high, I shouldn't do paid search. Instead, think along the lines of, can I convert clicks to customers as well or better than my competitors? Can I extract as much or more value out of customers as my average competitor? And if the answer is yes to any of those questions, then you should be doing paid search already, and you shouldn't worry, or you should worry less about the cost per clicks in the market. The other way to look at this is operating the campaign solely on trying to achieve a defined cost per acquisition rather than working to a budget. So I know we've got some very lucky organizations on the call today who kind of worked in this model. So they don't get given a budget to kind of spend through pay-per-click and other channels. But as long as they can convert a customer at a cost of X, then they're allowed to proceed and spend money. So this is a really good way of thinking, because actually, if you're comfortable with spending X in order to achieve a sale or an inquiry or an appointment booking, whatever it might be, then that is a really good way to run a campaign, because ultimately then what you're saying to your internal marketing team or to an agency is keep working, and if we're working to that threshold, then don't let there be a limit. So what targeting methods can you do through Google search? So you can target through keywords. So keywords are phrases advertisers use to tell platforms like Google and Bing what searches we want to show up for. So when someone goes to Google and types in red shoes, Google will scan your account to see if you have the keyword red shoes in your account. And if you do, then you're eligible to show up for that query. If not, then your ad won't show. There's obviously many other factors that also influence whether your ad will show, such as keyword match types, negative keywords, and keyword bids, but in principle, that's how it works. But there is a second way, and this is interesting because a lot of people still aren't using this, and this is called dynamic search ads. So dynamic search ad campaigns are relatively new to the kind of PPC playground and are a shift away from the usual keyword targeting. So instead of providing the platforms with a list of keywords, you simply provide them with your website, and the platforms will match the user's query to related content on your site. Now you can do this by allowing the platform to scan all pages or some of your website pages or even a specific list of pages. But all of the advert delivery will be determined by the content of your site. And dynamic search ads are a great tool when looking to expand the reach of your current search campaigns, because they were designed to help advertisers match to relevant queries that are not already being bid on in the account. So if you're getting stuck with how to broaden the list of keywords within your account, then it's certainly worth looking into dynamic search ads. Okay, if we look at Google Shopping now. So if you're an e-commerce retailer, this is going to be really relevant to you. So in terms of the ADA marketing funnel, if you cast your mind back to that, shopping ads fit right in at the same point as paid search, as you'd kind of expect, seeing as they're on the same search engine results page. So shopping ads are, however, super powerful for e-commerce advertisers. And if you do not use them at the moment, you almost certainly should be. Shopping ads give you a visual image result on the search engine results page, along with a title, price, and a store name, and a few other optional components. So one would hope that users that click on the adverts have more intent, as they've already seen the product's basic details. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they're a bit more of a warmer lead by the time they've clicked on your advert and you've incurred the click cost. So who's this for? So shopping is a super price competitive field. So Google would usually show the cheapest items first. And if your products are more expensive than your competitors, then you can expect to get less traffic from Google. So because of this, I'd say shopping ads are pretty much for any advertiser whose products are not much more expensive than the competitors. Even if your products are more expensive, still give shopping a try. It's certainly worth giving it that chance. And it might be worth it, albeit at a lower traffic level than you might have got if your prices were lower. In any case, I think it's worth trying. Maybe there are some sectors which it doesn't work so well for, such as some of the luxury brands, but that's definitely a channel which is worth looking at if you're an e-commerce retailer. Just a bit of recent news as well when it comes to Google Shopping. So Google has announced it'll be introducing free product listings to its search results page. So earlier in the year, Google allowed free product listings in the shopping search tab. And now they've moved this onto search as well. So the change is going to roll out in the US on mobile first, and then it's going to roll out to desktop. So since the shift, Google have kind of reported that there's been, on average, a 70% increase in clicks and 130% increase in impressions across both free listings and paid ads on Google Shopping in the US. So this comes about as Google aimed to help businesses struggling to connect with shoppers during the pandemic. So for any retailers listening to this webinar, this is certainly worth keeping a close eye on. Okay, let's move on to the Google Display Network. So in case you're not aware, display ads are visual, image-based ads that show up on third-party websites, often bought through an ad exchange or network such as Google Display Network. The good thing about display is that it can drive people into the top of your funnel at the awareness stage. So when you've got a new cool product or service that no one's ever heard of, then you need to drive awareness, and display as a push advertising medium can work for this. Also related to this benefit as a push ad medium, display also has a lot of scalability. So you're not limited by the amount of people already searching for your product or by the size of the current site audience. With display, you can access huge audiences, and if you have the budget and appetite to do so, of course. So how can you target your display ads? So display campaigns on the Google Display Network have quite a few different targeting options, but they fall into two main categories. So these are contextual or content targeting and also audience targeting. So contextual targeting means that your targeting options focus on the content of the page or site. So when you choose contextual targeting, you're indicating to Google that you want to show up on sites that have relevant content to you. When you choose audience targeting, on the other hand, you're telling Google you want to show up for people who exhibit the behaviours you've identified as important, regardless of what content they're viewing. So to put this into context, the example shown on the screen uses audience targeting, as the two adverts are not relevant to the website, which is Mashable, nor the current blog article that the user is reading. But it might well be applicable to the user who's actually browsing it. There are additional targeting methods with the two main strands, but we're going to pass over those for today. But obviously feel free to contact us if you'd like more information on display targeting. Okay, so we're going to move on to paid social. So with paid social these days, the £800 gorilla in the room, as you know, is Snapchat. No, I'm only joking. It's obviously Facebook. Yeah, everyone uses it. So 2.2 billion monthly active users. It's just phenomenal. And over the past few years, they've been constantly improving and innovating their ad targeting and creative options. So for most brands and businesses, when we're talking about paid social, the first thing you must consider is Facebook ads. And by extension, that also includes Instagram ads, because Facebook own Instagram and it's managed through the same platform. So one of the advantages of Facebook ads is its ability to target full funnel. So this means that it can be used to serve ads to people at every stage of the AIDA funnel. So at the awareness stage, you could target completely new users who might be targeted based on demographic data or their stated likes and interests. And you can target them with like an enticing video ad or kind of a creative ad that gets them familiar with your brand in the first place. Once those users engage with your ad in any way, so by clicking or liking it, you can then serve different ads to target those people moving through the interest and decision phases of the AIDA funnel. So at the interest phase, you'll want to give them more informational ads, explaining the virtues and benefits of your product or service. At the decision phase, this is where your retargeted Facebook ads will start to shine, and your ad creative will move more to a product and offer focused ad. Just to touch on retargeting, in case you haven't heard that term before, retargeting or remarketing is where you show an advert to someone who is engaged with you through a social media channel or through your website before. So you can actually show an advert to someone who's just browsed a pair of trainers on your e-commerce website and show them other trainers which they might be interested in. So referring back to the quick tips that I mentioned earlier, don't forget to build a relationship with your customers along that journey, rather than merely looking for a sale. So again, just using that trainer analogy, actually giving them tips on how to choose the best trainer and how they should measure their feet and what is comfortable and what's the right for the type of running that they do, whether it's on the road or mountain, is actually going to be really helpful, and it's going to build your relationship with that customer rather than simply just saying, here's a pair of trainers, they're £45. So just think about relationship building a little bit more rather than going straight for sales. Just to use another analogy, if you met someone new at like a friend's birthday party and they said to you, what do you do? you wouldn't go into like the full elevator pitch and be like, you know, hi, I'm Will, I'm founder and MD at WebBox, and we established in 2008, and we got a team like this, and we work for this kind of person, and here's our services. They'd be like, whoa, that's OTT. You would kind of just start with, you know, hi, I'm Will, and I work in digital marketing, and that's kind of enough for the intro. And then if they're interested, they can ask more. And that analogy, that principle should be used online. Let's build that relationship before we go straight in with a hard sell. So what targeting methods can you use on paid social? So you've got quite a few, and they vary slightly depending on the particular paid social platform. Furthermore, some channels will have more data to hand within particular niches than others. So for example, if you're a business to consumer organization looking to target users based on their interests, likes and hobbies, then Facebook would probably seem the logical channel to begin with. But if you're a B2B organization looking to target managing directors of companies in the UK that have more than 1,000 staff, then actually LinkedIn would probably be the best channel and the best place to start. So understand your audience, which will in turn allow you to choose the best social media channel for you. But you don't need to be limited to one, of course. You can run campaigns across many. So paid social, just in summary, is a massive topic. So please excuse this kind of summary edition. But hopefully it gives you a flavour of how these kind of channels could be used within your own marketing strategy. I'm just going to deep dive a little into Facebook just to give a little bit more information on targeting, but it's obviously going to be brief at this stage, and I appreciate we've got a wide group of people here from different organisations, so hopefully there's something in here for everyone. So deep diving into Facebook specifically, there are, I guess, 3 core targeting options. So you've got saved audiences, custom audiences, and lookalike audiences. So I just want to have a quick look at each of those 3. So saved audiences, so when you create a saved audience, your most important tool, shall I say, is going to be the detailed targeting box. So that's the one that the arrow is pointing to on the screen. This allows you to target people based on their interests, location, demographics and behaviours. And then you can also exclude people with particular interests as well. Furthermore, if you're in the business-to-business space and you don't think Facebook is relevant for you, it's worth noting that you can enter a wide set of interests related to your product or ideal client based on their job, seniority or interest, or industry. So for example, you could target people based on the company they're working for, or the industry they're working in, or even the job title that they've shared with Facebook. So often people look at Facebook as kind of a great channel to kind of target a consumer, but I would challenge that today and say that it does also work in a business-to-business setting, or as we said earlier, people to people. So custom audiences then, so how do they differ? So this allows you to import user email addresses and or install the tracking pixel on your website for retargeting through the social media platform. So we found this kind of targeting works really well if I kind of stick on business to business for now. So for example, your website visitors, we could target people who've already shown some interest in your services by browsing your service pages on the website. Or we could show a different advert to those who have been specifically to your pricing page on your website, for example. Or again, a different message to those who have read your blog but not looked at your services or subscribed to your newsletter. And it's by segmenting this data that you start to get granular with it and you start to get better results. So don't treat this as, you know, someone's been to my website, so I'm going to serve them this advert. Look at it as, what have they done on the website? And then let's serve an advert which is relevant to that action. And then the third and final targeting method on Facebook is lookalike audiences. So using a lookalike audience, you can reach new people who are likely to be interested in your business because they're similar to your existing customers. So this is based on the idea that people who are most similar to your existing users are also the most likely to convert. So obviously there are going to be smaller numbers within these pools, but they're probably more precisely matched to your source audience. And also it's worth saying, if you've tried this in the past and didn't feel it worked, Facebook's tools are actually much more sophisticated in their audience matching than you might think, and that has been in the past. So it's worth giving this a go if you have tried it in the past. But just a note of warning, okay? So don't upload purchase lists of email addresses that you've found online, because Facebook will find out. And also secondly, thanks to the GDPR, Facebook users can also see which businesses have uploaded a list with their information on it. So just be aware that there's transparency now on both sides, okay? So don't get into trouble. Okay, final section of this webinar as we come towards the end. So I'm going to just go through a few quick wins and tips. So if you're already running a pay-per-click campaign, hopefully these are things which you can start to implement within it, literally as of today. So use trust factors, okay? Gain trust in your advert copy. Speak your customer's language. Don't be too salesy or use slang. Make sure your brand is trusted, and do that by building a relationship. So emojis are everywhere, but let's go easy on them. So unless it's really on brand, use emojis without using them to excess. But also understand that you might not use them in your written communication, but your audience might. So this is about putting yourself in your audience's shoes. And if they relate to that, then they can be really good to catch the attention as someone scrolls down their feed quickly. And actually, just as a small point, you can see an emoji within this advert here, which actually does draw attention to the ad more than if it was not there. So this point is about being human. So often we sit behind our screens, or we sit behind our Facebook or Twitter account, and we're just not a person to the kind of end user. We just have this facade. And I want to challenge that again today to say we need to be human when we do this form of marketing. So sometimes using a face of the company is going to be a more value because it's personable. So if you've got maybe a local shop or something like that, then actually you want to be the face of that. And I think it also works for much larger brands. If you're part of a university, college, solicitor's firm, whatever that might be, then actually using a face is a really good way to do that, because when that person finally does engage with you face to face, they're going to know someone straight away. So that's a really good way to kind of break down that barrier. So during this pandemic as well, I guess we've all had to learn the hard way that we don't necessarily wear a suit whilst working at home. People have been a lot more relaxed in meetings, which is a good thing. I had a meeting with someone the other day, and their cat walked across their screen, and someone else, their child was on the seat with them. And I think it's really nice. Actually, there's nothing wrong with that at all. We are people at the end of the day, and sometimes letting down that business facade is a positive thing. So I'd encourage you again to do that through your adverts. And also just note the language used on this advert. It's softer language. It's about learning more rather than sign up now or buy now. So just look at the language that you use as well, because you wouldn't necessarily use that language in conversation, but you would say in conversation, would you like to learn more? Okay, also use stats. Okay, these are really good ways to make your advert stand out. Okay, so when you say 58% of Fortune 500 companies use Zoom, immediately that elevates Zoom, okay? So it builds trust and suppresses any concerns about potentially not knowing a particular brand as well. So stats can be a really good way to do this. If you haven't got stats, you might want to use testimonials. So something like the one you can see here works really well, or even better, a video testimonial, because that engages people for a longer period of time. You might want to kind of be a little bit more conversational through your advert copy as well. So you might want to kind of ask a question. So, ask them, do you want to be the best, or do you want to streamline your process? Or do you want to compare the best insurances in one place? This instantly grabs the attention of the user and allows them to relate to the advert. So these kind of questions are a really good way to engage your users further. And if you're, mentioned maybe in an industry report, or you might kind of be doing PR, let's jump on the back of that as well. So rather than just let that piece of PR or report publicize, the content itself, jump on the back of that and use paid ads to increase the exposure of that content. So that's all of the kind of quick wins and tips for you today. I just want to summarize by saying data is your friend, okay? Gather data and learn from it in order to make informed decisions. This should inform both our tactics and our strategy. Hypothesize, test, and pivot. So very few campaigns get this right straight away, and no campaign stays still. Understand that. People don't just leave this stuff and let it carry on. You constantly test, you constantly keep ahead of your competitors, you keep learning and you keep pivoting, because that is how this market continues to evolve. And actually that's the time consuming part, which many people don't have time for, but it's actually what gets you the most value out of the campaign. So be personal. This is person to person. This is not business to consumers and business to business, okay? We buy from people, so make our online experience the same. And then finally, let's give value. Always give value in our campaigns, okay? It's not about sales all the time. We know that it's several touch points or interactions before someone actually might become a customer of ours. So let's start the awareness piece of the jigsaw by just giving value. Give value, and it will come back to you. So I just want to say a massive thank you for listening to me. It's a little longer than I thought, but I just want to thank you for your attention. If you've got any questions following this, please don't hesitate to contact me. My details are there, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. But we'll also make time now for some questions if you want to put any of those in the chat. So feel free to do that. So if you want to pull up your chat windows, feel free to put some questions in, and I will have a look at them now. So if you do need to head off, that's absolutely fine. But if you can stay with us maybe for another 5-10 minutes, we'll go through some of your questions. So I will just pull up our questions here. Okay, fantastic. So I'm just going to read out the first one here. Okay, so would the AIDA model be relevant in a business-to-business context as well? Okay, I would say 100% yes. I think the AIDA model works in both business-to-business and business-to-consumer. The reason I say that is if you look at, if I could use us as an example, so if we are engaging with a potential client, there needs to be an awareness of WebBox. So we need to be out there in the market. We need to be releasing useful information, giving value, maybe doing videos for you to learn about paid ads and things like that. And then that drives into the other parts of the funnel. I don't think in a lot of sectors these days, people just go straight into that purchase, and especially if it's a considered purchase. So, for example, I know one of our team recently chose a solicitor for moving house throughout the pandemic, and he did quite a bit of research in terms of looking at who he should use, and he engaged with a few, and it wasn't about what are your costs? How quickly can you turn this around? He actually considered other things. So, did that firm have any awards to their name? Are they known in the community? Have they been around for some time? And there were other metrics to him engaging with them So it was about giving value and building trust and building that relationship before getting into the commercials. So yeah, I definitely think it's relevant in a B2B context. So we've got another one here. Please talk through a bit more how to set up remarketing. Okay, yeah, so please talk through a bit more on how to set up remarketing. So that's through Google or Facebook. So that's coming from Edwin. So thanks for that question. Do you know what, with that one, there's obviously a process you can take, and I'd be happy to send you over a guide in terms of how you can set up remarketing. That's probably going to be the easiest way to do this, rather than me talk you through each step, because that might take some time. But it's actually fairly straightforward, and if it helps others, I'm happy to send it to you as well. But I can just send a simple guide on how to set up remarketing, because we know that people don't buy straight away. So actually re-engaging with them through maybe a Facebook ad after they've been to your website is a really good way to bring them back to you. So thank you for Edwin. I will certainly come back. Okay, in terms of the other question, so what analytics are you using to calculate effective frequency ratios? So ultimately, click-through rate is the main one, as we'd expect this to be low if the user is being served the same ad too many times. If you're paying per impression, then you'd be wasting budget by serving the ad to the same person too often. So again, Edwin, I'm happy to touch base with you a little bit more about that. So Philip's asked, will you be making this recording available? Yes, we'll be making this recording available hopefully later today or tomorrow. So we'll send you a link to that as well as the slide deck. Okay, so another question here. So do you have any tips for those who are trying to change behavior rather than selling a product or service? So that's coming from Emma. So Emma, I might need a little bit more context here, so I'm happy to discuss this with you again kind of further. But I would say, broadly speaking, if you're trying to change behavior, and I'm going to take that as your user's behavior rather than anything internally, then actually I think that building relationship and engaging with users is where it needs to start. So you might at the moment run ads which are quite direct, and they talk about a call to action. And I think really if you know, maybe together we could step back and consider a stepping stone approach, okay? So we could look at how we engage with users initially and how we then start to go through a funnel of engaging with them, providing value to a point where at that stage you can then bring in the offer and hopefully close customers. Don't get me wrong, we're all about that final part. So we're very results driven and, you know, ROI driven, but we're also aware that that doesn't happen overnight often. So if you're going to go and buy some trainers because you need new running shoes, that's a very different buying journey to potentially something like in the B2B sector, where you might be choosing a solicitor or choosing an agency, and you will do a bit more research and you will engage with them for longer before you make that choice. So really good question, Emma, thank you for that, and happy to touch on it a little bit more if that didn't come at the same angle that you were looking for. So it looks like that's all of our questions to date. And as I said at the start, if you don't want to kind of ask questions in this forum, please feel free to use my contact details to kind of get in touch. So all really that's left is for me to play the Wales Tech Week outro video. And just want to genuinely thank you for joining me this morning. It's been really good to kind of share this information with you. And genuinely, if you need any help and support, hopefully you know where we are now. And please don't hesitate to get in touch. So I will play our outro video and we will call it a day. So let's go, let's move on. Just loading now. There we go. Great. So thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for being part of the Wales Tech Week. Thank you to all of our partners and sponsors. It's been amazing, and we'll be in touch very soon with the recording and slide deck. So all the best. Thank you so much.